But to lead people means that you get the benefit of their motivation, of their buy-in, of their creativity, of their willingness to do things. And you cannot force people to be creative. You cannot force them to do amazing things. You might be able to force them to do small things or force them to do exactly what you tell them. But when you're really leading, you've empowered them to chart their own path that goes along with this shared vision.
Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where we get inside the minds of leaders to harvest great ideas and lessons that help you grow as a difference maker in food and agriculture. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. Today's conversation is about what it means to really lead forward, to stay grounded in purpose while growing through change. Our guest today is Blaze Currie, the practice lead for food and ag at Vivayic, where he helps mission-driven organizations rethink how they grow people, align teams, and adapt to a world that refuses to slow down. Before joining Vivayic, Blaze spent years leading in agricultural education and youth development, including serving on the National FFA staff, where he guided strategy and leadership programs that help shape thousands of young leaders. He's also a TEDx speaker, known for his thoughtful take on how people and organizations can learn faster than the change happening around them. Blaze, welcome to the pod.
Yes, thanks for having me, Nicole.
What did I miss from your bio?
Well, so yesterday was my birthday and I turned 40. And
Happy birthday.
Yes, thank you. And maybe as some insight, I got a couple of gifts. One was some utensils that I could use when grilling, like, smoking or grilling. Another was a very thick history book about about wars. And the third were tickets to see Steve Martin and Martin Short. So I think those three things probably give a good window into my life outside of work.
I love that. That's a great way to add to the bio too. And where is home for you, Blaze?
So I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina. My wife and I have lived here about almost 3 years.
Oh, awesome. I did not know that you lived in Raleigh. I'm glad I
Yeah,
asked. My husband and I used to live in Raleigh. Small world.
it's a beautiful place. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes, it is. It's like the perfect place in North Carolina too. I feel like because you get the city, but you're like close to the beach. You can be in the mountains very quickly. It's a wonderful place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people leave town on the weekends to go to the beach or to go to the mountains.
Where I wanted to start, Blaze, this conversation is give us a little bit of background for someone who hasn't heard of Vivayic and who you are and what you guys do.
Yeah, so Vivayic is a learning strategy organization. So we help nonprofits, for-profit businesses, K through 12 educational organizations with their learning design needs. So we design curriculum, we design training programs, we help audit leadership development programs. So kind of a wide range, but it's a family-owned business, and we have some really strong clients that we've worked with for years, and we like to help people with their learning design needs.
So learning design sounds fancy. Tell me why an organization in agriculture needs someone like Vivayic.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So agriculture by nature is fairly technical. And so whether it could be that there's an association that maybe, for example, represents a lot of members, a lot of producers, and there's a new disease outbreak, and they want to educate those producers on the disease outbreak, or in a company that sells agricultural products, maybe there's an innovation, and they want to train all their salespeople on how to talk about that specific innovation, not so much from a marketing sales pitch standpoint, but to actually articulate how the product works. And so because agriculture is often technical in nature, there's a lot of learning that's required. And it's always changing. The ag industries, there's new innovations, things are changing frequently. And so where there is technology or highly technical things and a lot of change, there's often a requirement for a lot of learning.
Ah, yes. See, that makes it feel so practical and like such an important problem that you are helping solve for the industry. Because I think we all have been in scenarios, those of us who work in agriculture, where how do I simplify this technical information so that someone else can understand it and then go talk about it too. So
Yes, especially because sometimes we're designing learning for a producer that's like they're learning about it on the combine or in the coffee shop. And so we have to be really smart about how we are designing the learning materials that we are working for with our clients.
yeah. So, Blaze, give us a little background on your career journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've been very connected to the agriculture industry my entire career. I grew up on a cotton and watermelon farm in West Texas, so agriculture has been a part of my life my entire life. So it's funny. I've woven together maybe two different things that keep popping back in and out of my career. One of those is working with young leaders. So I have just my entire career, I've found that no matter what role I'm in, I find myself frequently working with young leaders, either designing leadership development programs or coaching young leaders. And the other part of that, I would say, is global agriculture. So I've spent quite a bit of time overseas, both in East and West Africa, in the Middle East. And so I've done quite a bit of international development work. And so those have kind of been the two golden threads of my career. And I'm really enjoying what I get to do now with Vivayic because I get to work with so many clients and companies that are doing so many things. I still get to work on both of those things, some international agricultural topics and with leaders in agriculture.
Yeah, that's a cool cross section of things to get to work on. So, tell me, as you look back, what experiences, maybe early in life or throughout your career, shaped how you think and approach leadership?
One of the most transformative experiences that I had was my first job out of college. So when I graduated college, I joined a team that went to Iraq, and we were an asset of the military. So this was in 2008. It was during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and so we were an asset of the military. In our job, it was a team of 12 of us. We were called Team Borlaug, named after Dr. Norman Borlaug. For some of your listeners who may know who Norman Borlaug is. And our job was to do agricultural assessments for the military. They were trying to rebuild Iraq, and so they were focusing a lot in the agriculture sector, and they wanted some experts. And I was young and fresh out of college, so my job was to interview young farmers in Iraq and try to figure out, what were their challenges, what were their opportunities. And there was many transformative moments in that experience, but one that stands out to me was one day we were in a caravan going to interview some farmers, and a bomb went off near our caravan. It was an embedded explosive device called an IED, and thankfully no one was hurt. But as soon as it went off, the soldiers began to try to figure out who planted this device, and ultimately they apprehended this young man who looked to be about my age, and he had a wife and little children, and I saw them kind of detaining him. And later that night, I was talking with the rest of the team, and I just thought, like, I was saying things like, I can't believe he did that. Like, why would somebody so young with so much life ahead of them throw it all away? Why was he so angry to plant an explosive device? And I had these really amazing mentors. They asked really good questions. And so they started asking me, like, well, he's about your age. If you were in his shoes, why might you do that? And so I
Oh,
started thinking about it, and I'm like,
that's an
well,
intense reflection process.
yes. I'm like, well, probably he doesn't know who's going to be there. How long is the US military going to be there? Who's going to be left when the military leaves? Was his family threatened? Was he offered money to do this? Maybe he hoped that no one would get hurt, but he was encouraged to do this by a group that he was scared of. So I started thinking about all that. And actually, the best way I can describe the lesson I learned is from the recent television series Ted Lasso. I don't know if
Oh,
you're
I
Ted
love Ted
Lasso.
Lasso, yes.
So there's a line in Ted Lasso where he says, "Don't be judgmental, be curious." And that experience in Iraq and many since then have just reinforced for me the value of curiosity. And many of the leaders that I've met in my life that I really admire and look up to, they have different styles, they have all kinds of different attributes, but one thing they all share is they're just innately curious people. And so that would be the lesson: don't be judgmental, be curious.
Oh, that is something I feel like, as Savannah and I have done many of these interviews, continues to come up again and again. And it sounds like for you, it's something you've had to develop some of that curiosity. Do you have any, like, what are questions you ask yourself today to kind of spark some of that reflection? Or do you have a favorite question that you like to ask as you think about developing and making that curiosity a practice?
Yeah, one one little tip that I try to do is ask why 5 times. Sometimes we ask why, and the first answer is we settle on that. But usually if you why it's kind of like a child, like if you think of like a little toddler, but why, but why. I think that it's like there's so much surface area to open-ended questions. So I think one is asking why, asking open-ended questions I've found to be very helpful. But then the other is just trying to put myself in someone else's shoes. And there's no, I mean, I'm not saying I do it all the time or that I'm perfect at it, but I find that I'm better able to help lead or problem solve if I can take a moment and not ask how would I do this, but ask like what might be going through their mind, what's their experience. I find it just extremely helpful.
Yes, absolutely. I love questions, but is there any other way that you have developed that sense of curiosity, or really worked to strengthen that muscle throughout your career and leadership journey?
I think when you put yourself in places that are uncomfortable, curiosity becomes a natural tool. So for me, it's been international travel, but it doesn't have to be international travel. I think when people are the first to raise their hand to say, "I'll go try that out," or I'll see what that's all about. I think those kinds of experiences where it's a little uncomfortable, it's outside of the ordinary, it there's something that it awakens kind of the child in you that wants to know what's going on, why is this way, and I mentioned Norman Borlaug earlier. The good fortune to get to know him before he passed away because he was a professor when I was at Texas A&M University, and so in Dr. Borlaug, was the first kind of agriculturalist to win the Nobel Peace Prize for his innovations in agriculture. And I was talking to him, and he was in his 90s, and like you would think that that he would. I'm like looking at this hero, saved a billion lives with his innovations. And when he would talk to me, he would get very specific, like, you grew up on a farm. What kind of wheat, how much wheat does your dad grow? Does he have this wheat rust disease? That's like, he was just innately curious. And I just thought to myself, like, if at 90 years old, after seeing the world and being the father of the Green Revolution, if you're waking up every day and asking tons of questions, like, there's something key there. And I just admire people that never quit learning.
Mm. Amen. And I think that's a key part of leadership. Like I've often been told, like leaders are readers, but it's really leaders are learners and continuing to like your journey's never done, and there's always another tool or story or interaction or podcast, to listen to help you along that way.
I love that. Leaders are learners. Yes, I very much retweet, as they say.
I love it. Love it. So I want to ask a little bit about the international side of your career because you obviously have had some incredible experiences. How have your international agriculture experiences shaped the way you look at American agriculture?
Uh, well, one thing that I think that across the world, farmers are very similar. That we think we're very different, but we're all dependent upon the weather. I don't know exactly why or how this came to be, but there's a deep family connection. So everywhere across, there's just a deep family connection to agriculture in many cases. And there's a lot of like richness and tradition. The traditions may be different, but there's just this value of tradition. And it's an ancient, it's the oldest industry in the world, right? So it's like there's just I think the thing that's always surprised me is no matter where I've traveled, when you're working with farmers, there's so much they have in common. Sometimes I think take for granted in the United States is that in many places farmers are kind of looked down upon in many societies. They're the lower tier, they're the downtrodden, and I just think that there's a lot of pride in the U.S. and in most consumers. They may question products, but they love farmers. They love hearing from farmers, and so I think that's one thing that we often take for granted here that I have noticed is different around the world, and I love it when we're doing international projects and we can help farmers gain a greater voice within their society and within their government.
Yeah, I never would have thought about that, Blaze, but that's in it in the United States. Yes, farmers are heroes in a lot of ways, or the the idea of living on a farm is aspirational for a lot of people, and they're a very trusted voice from the consumer standpoint. But that's such an interesting reflection of the differences in the U.S. versus other parts of the world. Well, I want to talk about Vivayic talks a lot about leading forward, and I'm curious what lead forward means to you. How would you define that?
Well, I think maybe in its simplest form, it's that you're going somewhere. I think that there are many ways to lead forward, but there may be some key indicators to determine, am I leading forward? And I think especially now that we're in a moment, especially in the agriculture industry, where there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of change that's happening. And so I think organizations that when the leaders or the teams that they lead are when you hear things like, so what are we going to do about it? Or here's what we're going to do next. Or well, plan A didn't work, so we're going to go with plan B. Like that sense of agency to me is an indicator that you're a part of a team or an organization that's leading forward. However, if what you hear from your leaders or from members of the team or members of the organization is a lot of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. What are we going to, like how this is going to be, this is terrible, or just kind of their hands in the air. I think it's okay to have a little bit of that, but when you're perpetually hearing that cycle and not very much solution, I think that's an indicator that you're not leading forward.
Makes a lot of sense of like going somewhere. You've got to work in a lot of different parts of agriculture and different teams and organizations. What what do you think the industry is going to look like in 10 years
In 10 years,
or in the future? Yeah, but 10 years
yeah.
puts a good time frame on it. 2035.
Yeah. Well, I think there's going to be some pretty major leadership transitions that occur, both from the farm gate all the way to the associations, local farm cooperatives, all the way to the some of the major ag companies. We're going to have a big wave of retirements and people transferring land. So I think there'll be a new wave of leaders at the top. Is one way in which I think it'll look quite a bit different. The I think maybe some other differences. I don't know. Honestly, this is going to not sound exciting. I think that it'll look more the same than we anticipate. It's funny to me, but I think we've been going to have autonomous vehicles that were going to drive themselves for 50 years now, and we are just now getting them. Change often happens slower than we think it will. And often the things that change the most are the things that were hard to predict. So the things that we think are going to change take longer than we think, and then then there's this whole like set of tertiary things that we never anticipated that change really fast. So I think it's really kind of hard to predict what the future is going to look like in 10 years. But my guess is that in many ways it won't look huge amount different than it does now, other than there'll be a new wave of leaders that are stepping up into leadership roles over the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were talking about the things that will change us the most or the things we can't predict, I immediately thought COVID and how much that changed so many things across the industry, and no one ever could have predicted that. Uh, and so, as we think about that generational leadership change, what kind of leaders do you think we need next?
I think, well, one, I think we need leaders that are going to be willing to adapt, that are adaptive. I also think we're going to need, there's a term I heard recently and I've really kind of fallen in love with it, but I think we're going to need what I would call apex communicators. And the reason I say that is we are entering a time, this is not just the ag industry, this is across the board, where there is a lot of distraction and a lot of noise. So attention spans are decreasing. That's measured, by the way. That's like a measured thing that people have less attention than they did 10 years ago. So people's attention span's shorter. The way in which we get news and information is bifurcated now. We have channels in which we get it. We don't hear from the other side as much, and so we are going to need leaders that are really adept at communicating vision, communicating realities, communicating information. And I think the individuals that find ways to be really effective communicators are going to be successful, because I think it's just going to be one of the most critical traits in a leader moving forward.
Oh, yeah, fascinating. Okay, so if we think about someone trying to become an apex communicator, and I love that phrase, and what does that tangibly look like to someone? Like, what are the skills that I need to be thinking about developing and growing?
Actually, this one might sound counterintuitive, but the best communicators are really effective listeners because they best communicators have a really good grasp of their audience, their learners, their employees, however you want to frame it. But they have a really in depth and maybe like almost a unique ability to kind of anticipate and understand what those learners are thinking or what they're going through or what their audience is thinking. And so a big part of it is being a really good listener and being pretty empathetic so that you kind of know what it is they're looking for so that you can communicate it. I think the other thing is going to be very clear and not wishy-washy or blurry. Especially, I think there's some evidence or some research around this youngest generation that's entering the workforce, and they really have zero tolerance for whitewashing something, like pretending something's they want you to tell the truth and they want you to be direct about it. So I think being really good listeners and being able to articulate the truth in a compelling and direct way is going to be really important in terms of communication and for leaders in the future.
I agree with that. I think a lot of people just tell me the truth, like not all the rosy sunshine, rainbows, unicorns. Like if it's bad, tell me it's bad. And two, I see it a lot in communication from leaders on where we're going and a desire. I think there's been in some organizations, whether you want to call it micromanagement or very when you have a lot of expertise, which we do in agriculture, it may be a shift in some management styles to like let go or sit back or even trying to bring people into that vision building. But I've also noticed like, hey, some people just want to tell you where are we going, and then I can help us get there.
Exactly. And actually you said something that maybe trigger back to your, like, what does it tactically look like to be, an apex communicator? I think so. One of the phrases that's just really stuck with me that is part of learning design actually is that we are feeling creatures that think, not the other way around. So we need people to touch our limbic brain when they're communicating to us. We can rationalize things, but if you want us to be motivated, if you want reaction, you have to touch into that limbic brain, that emotional part of the brain where we feel something. And I think that might even be more important because we live in an information age. I mean, we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, but we want to feel something. And I think the people that another attribute I think to being a really effective communicator as a leader are the leaders that are going to be able, again, because they know their audience really well and they've been really thoughtful about it and they're telling the truth and they've earned trust. They are going to be the ones that are able to reach in and touch an emotion and then connect that emotion back to what needs to happen. So we need to focus, or we need to change our strategy, or we need to buckle up and be ready for a bumpy ride. But there needs to be the touch of the emotion before we rationalize our 5 point strategic plan or whatever. The communicators that can touch that emotion are going to be really effective, and the organizations they lead are going to benefit from their leadership.
Yeah. As someone who works in learning design with a lot of organizations, do you have an example of how to do that in like touch on the limbic brain and the emotional side while also communicating the information? Like if I'm someone listening and I'm putting together a presentation or I have to communicate to my team hard news or, I'm trying to get the team rallied around change that no one wants to do. What are some examples of ways I can actually apply that?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier about really understanding your audience, and there's no way around that. Like, so really key is just taking time to really study who is it that I'm talking to? What do they care about? What's on their mind? What are they nervous about? What excites them? It's like almost impossible to spend too much time analyzing who your audience is if you're wanting to like reach them emotionally. But there's this tool. It's kind of a marketing tool, but it's got a long background and history to a guy named Joseph Campbell. But it's called the Hero's Journey. And have you ever heard of that, Nicole, the Hero's Journeys?
Yes.
Okay, I saw you
Yep.
nod, so I thought. So here's how I'd apply it to learning design, being a good leader. So often, like when you're a leader, like you're not the hero, the audience is the hero. So if you want to reach them emotionally, the goal is to spark in them what the hero's, all the hero's journey is like. They need to see themselves in the hero that you're describing. So when you describe the future state that we've overcome this challenge, they need to see themselves as being the ones that have overcome that challenge. Or or when you're describing the future state of, hey, this next 2 years is going to be hard with the commodity prices the way they are, but this is how we're going to get past it. They need to be able to see themselves as the ones that are helping solve that problem. That they need to be to see them. If they see themselves as the hero, it touches them emotionally.
Yes. So I use the hero's journey from a marketing standpoint in that your business is or your brand or your product is never the hero, the customer is the hero
Exactly.
and you are the guide. And so like the customer is like Katniss in the Hunger Games and you are honestly Hey Mitch like and
Yes.
being that role whether you're in marketing or trying to lead a team, I think helps in and I think it's hard in leadership too because you want to be the one that alleviates pain from other people, but if they can't see themselves on the journey of overcoming the thing, then it's not a hero's journey. It's a you pulling people along.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're not really, you're not really leading people at that point. You're directing them, but to lead people means that you get the benefit of their motivation, of their buy-in, of their creativity, of their willingness to do things. And you cannot force people to be creative. You cannot force them to do amazing things. You might be able to force them to do small things or force them to do exactly what you tell them. But when you're really leading, you've empowered them to chart their own path that goes along with the shared vision. And that the hero's journey is a great, just how you described it. You're the guide, they're the hero. That is just so powerful to be able to unlock so many others to join you on that journey.
Yeah. And I think leadership often comes with a pressure, and there's privilege and pressure, but it's also sometimes a burden. And knowing that, like, if you are directing, then all of the pressure and all of the burden is on you. But if you're guiding, then it's a shared carrying of all of it. That's to me how you get like 2 plus 2 to equal 6 instead of just 4 kind of thing.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
So the other thing you talked about that the leaders of the future will need is adaptability. One, I'm curious from your own leadership journey, how are you someone you would describe as an adaptable leader? Is that a skill that you've had to build over your own personal journey?
I've had to, yes, for sure had to build it. I don't know if it's a situation where I don't, I think I think it was through trial by fire, School of Hard Knocks. I've talked about international work earlier. I was helping launch a brand new organization called AgriCorps. AgriCorps is still around today, but it was kind of a Peace Corps style organization. And we got a group of fellows to go overseas. They were going to spend a year overseas in Liberia, and I spent a year recruiting them. We got them ready to go. Training was set, and then 2 weeks before we were to arrive in Liberia, I was already there in Liberia, but 2 weeks before they were to arrive, there was the Ebola epidemic broke out in Liberia, and all of the State Department, all the U.S. officials evacuated, and so I had to evacuate, and I went to Ghana, and we reached out to these fellows who'd prepared for 6 months to go to Liberia, and said, "We can't go to Liberia. I've never been to Ghana, but I know someone there. Would you be willing to pivot this program in 2 weeks to Ghana?" And they all of them said yes. So in 2 weeks, we found housing for them and did all this stuff. I have other examples, but like I look back on that and I'm like, that was a moment that really probably tested my ability to be adaptive more than just about any other I can think of. I've thought of this phrase: we make the road by walking. Like I don't know that you can do things to prepare to be better. You can work on skills to be better at adaptive leadership. I think there's things you can do to prepare for change, but I honestly think you get better at being an adaptive leader by putting yourself in situations where it requires it. It's a muscle.
Yes, yes, absolutely it is. You have incredible stories. That one gave me chills too. To that point, what would you recommend for someone who maybe struggles with change or stepping outside of their comfort zone? I totally agree with you. Adaptability is something that you get more comfortable with the more you have jumped off the deep end or been pushed, honestly. But I try to balance that myself with Miss Savannah's heard me say this several times where I don't like to baptism by fire people unless unless it's unavoidable. I think there's a lot you can learn when you push yourself off the deep end. But for anyone who's maybe scared to jump or maybe struggles with that, or maybe for a leader like me who potentially protects their team too much from some of that, what advice would you share to to grow the ability to be adaptable when the situation needs it?
Yeah, well, the example I used was when there was an external force that kind of was thrust upon us. All of us, of course, faced this with COVID. Um, but if I, as I hear your question, I'm thinking about, okay, what does this look like when it's not necessarily this painful external force where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. What are we going to do? And I think that there are ways in which you can work on the muscle of adaptability without it being painful or without there being some sort of like crazy external force thrust upon you. Some ways that I have seen leaders do a really great job with this is leaders that continually ask tough questions of themselves and of their team, not like ones that are dangerous or ones that are extremely uncomfortable. But what I mean is just like, are we doing like continually ask, are we doing the right things? Are there ways that we could do this better? Uh, and teams a, that have built a relationship and a trust to a degree where they can have a lot of candor. I think if you can combine those things where you're asking challenging questions, you've got a lot of trust amongst the team, and you've created a space where there's a lot of candor and people speak openly and freely, like you have prepared yourself to be pretty adaptive because you can anticipate changes earlier because you're asking really tough questions. You're willing to change because you're able to talk through the things you're worried about with change, the things that concern you, the things that excite you, and you trust your team. You're not doing it alone to go through that change together. So I think those are some of the muscles that you can exercise all the time or consistently, and that prepares you to be better when you need to change.
What if you are either a new leader or a leader that hasn't had the time to build some of that trust and you're having to lead through change? So, like, say I'm a leader that's walked into an organization, I've been hired to lead a change in the organization, and it's got a timeline that has got to be accomplished by, but I have people who are resistant, not adaptive. Any tips for leading through that kind of scenario or how you move to adaptability on a faster timeline than sometimes trust is? Like, trust takes time and investment and, time together. And, or maybe what I'm asking is like, is there a hack to speed up trust?
I'm glad that you've kind of followed up with the second part because my first answer, my initial answer to your question was going to be, if you don't have time to build trust, then um, what are you trying to change, or what's the impetus? Because I think that there is time to build trust. You have to make it, but there is time to build trust. And honestly, the trick is I don't know that there's a hack. I wish there was. I wish there was a simple answer. I think you can do things that look like you're building trust. You can create some. There's some hacks that are performative, but again, we mentioned this earlier. I think we've got people now, a generation that's entering the workforce, and many of us now that we can smell out something that's performative and not real. And so I think you probably put yourself as a leader at more danger by trying to rapidly rush through trust or rapidly build trust when it's not really real. You might be putting yourself and your team in more danger than being honest about, we're going to have to go through this hard thing, and I know I'm new and I haven't really given you a reason to trust me yet. So I'm going to earn that every day, and I'm going to do it in these ways. I think that kind of transparency. I think if you're a brand new leader and you're thrust into a situation, you've been hired, and you're like, we hired you to bring about this change. I think clearly communicating it, being honest and forthright with the people that you're making the change for is really important. And then if I could give one maybe tip, it's not a hack, but it was something insightful for me. I heard someone say once that people are not afraid of change; they're afraid of loss. And every change, like almost every time there is change, there's inevitably loss. And so, as a leader, making space to allow people that are going to suffer that loss to name it, to speak candidly about what that loss means to them, and to recognize it, mourn it even, and then you can move on. If you don't, 6 months later, they're still grieving the loss because you never gave them the chance to name it. And then they get labeled as people that were not, they weren't willing to move on. And I think I could say their critique of the leader might be, yeah, but our leader pretended that there was nothing lost here when there was.
Yeah. And then sometimes you lose those people in the evolution of it too.
Hmm. Yeah. It's amazing what you can do if people feel heard. Like they just want to know that, hey, I want to name that this change impacts me this way. And I want a moment. I just want to know that you know that, or I want a moment to be recognized for that. I think that goes a long way in building trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one being heard and then also valued and appreciated of like what
Yeah.
you bring to the table.
And it creates a moment of honesty. We're not going to pretend that there's not loss here. A lot of times organizations, they kind of really only talk about all the positives about the change, and they just were like, we're not going to focus on any we're not even acknowledge the negatives. And I just don't know that. I mean, maybe if it's small changes, or but if it's a big change and you don't want to acknowledge any of the loss that's occurred, I think it might be hard for people to say they really trust you because they don't feel like you really understood them.
Yeah. I think that's true. Even if the loss is good, like you can see that like that needed to happen. We needed to leave that behind or, you know, we lost a leader who moved on into something great. But if you don't acknowledge it, uh yeah, it can make the workplace feel less human too. And it's full of what did you say? Feeling what are we? Feeling beings who think? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're feeling
Yes.
creatures who think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so to kind of some of the things that you have laid out, Blaze, some of this leadership stuff sounds very simple. Um, and just yes, do these things. Here's what it practically sounds like, whether it's being a good communicator or, asking good questions. As someone who has worked in leadership development for a lot of your career, why do we still get it wrong so many times if it seems so simple?
Well, because it's not really simple. It we want to simplify because we want to codify the process, but leadership is it's a people process. It's not a technological process. In science or in experiments, we are trying to constantly find like replicable things. Like how do we do this, and we do it in such a way that we can replicate it. And it's like impossible to even replicate things, even as a leader. So the same leader can do something with one team and then try to give the second team and cannot replicate it because people are different. One is I think it's not simple. I think that we want to simplify it because we want to codify it. And it's helpful sometimes to break things down so that people can learn them or try them, or people like frameworks and models because they're helpful tools. But yeah, in real life, you're dealing with real people, and people act in unexpected ways. Um, so yeah, I think the maybe the best way I could put it is I think if anytime someone's looking for a shortcut or a hack for leadership, um, they can maybe mimic what leadership looks like, but it's not real leadership. Real leadership is it's not easy, it's tough, it takes work, and at least in my experience, I've never found any shortcuts that are really valuable.
Yeah. I'm glad that you put it that way because I think it also makes when you struggle with leadership, whether it's in your own growth or journey or in leading a team or an organization, when you put it that way, like the struggle is part of leadership and it makes the struggle piece feel normal. Like
Yeah,
that's part of it and it's meant to be part of it.
yeah, yes, and it's interesting. Like I one of the things that I think I've used to kind of believe about leadership was that there was like I needed to learn the process. I needed to go through it, learn the steps, and then I would become this leader. And then once you became one, then you were a leader, and it was done. And I now know that is not true. That it's really a journey more than it is a destination. And one of the signals, or one of the I think telling things about that is the best leaders continue to learn to be better leaders. And I so I just don't think you arrive. I think it's a journey.
Mhm. What is your favorite way to learn yourself, or what is something you are working on learning right now in your leadership journey?
So right now I'm working on getting a professional coaching certification, and it's awesome. I really love the program that I'm in. I'm about halfway into it right now, and it's a lot of fun. So I like picking up on challenging things, but one of the kind of universal tools for me, at least, is making time for reflection. We d- I and there have been times in my life where I have not done that, and I really regret it because a learning moment doesn't become full circle until we time to reflect on it. And so I've found myself in places where I'm doing a bunch of stuff and I'm just assuming, like, because I'm doing all this, I'm learning something. But if I haven't taken time to actually reflect on it, that can be journaling, it can be talking to someone. But if I haven't taken time to process it, then it's like I'm doing a bunch of actions, but I'm not really learning from them. And so that has been not something I do well all the time, but I constantly try to remind myself that, like, you just went through a cool experience or a challenging experience or whatever it may be. Carve out some time to reflect on it, talk to somebody about it, journal about it, whatever. But take some time to reflect on it. Otherwise, the learning's not complete.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you put it that way, that like without reflection, the learning isn't complete. Because this I'm going to say practice of reflection is also something that's come up across many of the conversations we've had with leaders on this podcast and the different ways that they reflect and the power of reflection. And I will just share vulnerably that as someone who likes to move fast, sometimes I am good at skipping that part or feeling like it's taking up too much time. I like to reflect, but sometimes I can feel like, man, I just spent a lot of time sitting there and thinking about this. But honestly, what you just did for me was reframe it as productive time, like truly sitting back, reflecting, whether it's journaling or talking with someone about an experience or even just going on a walk and thinking through things. Like that's part of the learning process. And if you haven't done that, you haven't learned, which just, helped my brain and like check the box. It's not done until you've done this part.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. That sometimes it feels like, well, that's not productive. Doing is productive, but yeah, it's kind of like any experiment. There's a moment for analysis. If you don't do it, why'd you do? Why you can't just experiment with no analysis? You would never learn anything. And I think the same is true with experiences.
And I think too, it's something that's hard to make time for as a leader of a team to either coach into the team members that you're leading or even to, um, like you get done with a big event or your team just gets done with a big quarter or whatever it may be to actually sit back and either do a postmortem or reflect on what went well and what didn't go well. Sometimes it's so easy to just move on to the next thing because we have another thing coming.
Yeah. So I mentioned, at the very beginning that I did some consulting work with the Army, with the U.S. Army. They have a process. Had never seen it until I experienced it, and I've loved it and brought it up in teams that I've been in since then. But they have this process where they call an after action review. So every time they do something really big, they have an after action review. And at least the way it was done for us was we would do a session on sustain and improve every day. I mean, at the end of every day. It was very simple. Sustain. What did we do today that we want to make sure we replicate tomorrow, and then improve. What are the changes we want to make? And I have found that it's so simple, but like what a powerful tool for a team to use. Maybe not every day, but you finish an event, you do being able to just have that quick moment of what did we learn here? What are we doing really well? We need to keep doing, and then what do we need to change? So it's just simple but powerful tool.
Yeah, I like that. It's awesome. Okay, Blades, let's move into the rapid fire segment. I'm going to ask you some quick hit questions and as best as you can, short answers only.
Okay, I'll try my very best. I'm a bit long winded.
I also am bad at this because I tend to ask follow up questions. Okay, so what is your favorite question to disrupt status quo thinking?
Think of the most creative person that you know. What would they do differently than you are right now? Or an alternative version of that is think of an organization or competitor that's really creative. How would they do this differently?
Ooh, I like that. Totally changes your mindset. What is one thing you wish leaders in agriculture would stop overthinking?
Leaders in general, I would say stop thinking that others are thinking about you. I think we get really worked up over, oh my gosh, what are they? Are they mad at me? Did they say? Most of the time, people are not thinking about you. It's our little fickle trick our ego plays.
That's good advice. Good reminder. What is a belief about leadership that you think it's time to retire?
We talked about this briefly earlier, but that there are shortcuts or hacks, that there's the 3 steps to do this or do these things and you can have a perfect team meeting. Those are good, helpful tips and tools, but there is just no shortcut to good leadership.
What is a book that changed the way you lead? Or it could be another leadership tool, but I'm a reader, so I like to ask people about books.
There's this book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game. Have you heard of it?
Yes. Hmm.
I
It's on my TBR. I have not read it, but
Yeah.
yes.
I found that one really really powerful, and the shift of how we view things as finite games, where there's winners and losers and set rules, but that most of leadership, most of leadership is not a finite game. There's multiple winners, and the rules are flexible. And the goal is not to win; the goal is to play to keep playing. And it's a complete mindset shift.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to move that one up on my TBR. It sounds great. What is a leadership hill you're willing to die on?
The cornerstones of trust and integrity still matter to be a good leader. You can call yourself a leader and you can coerce people to do things, or you may even have followers. But leaders that do not have integrity, they bring about bad results in the long run. So I just think integrity and honesty matter.
Oh, yeah. Amen. That's a hill worthy of dying on, for
Yes.
sure. Yes. Okay, and what is something you believed about leadership 10 years ago that you now think is wrong?
I mentioned this earlier that I used to believe it was. I used to believe leadership was like a destination, like you became a leader, and then once you were a leader, that was set. And now I just don't think it's that way. I think it's a continual process, a continual learning process where, again, because we mentioned this earlier, there's no simple solution to leadership. So it's a journey, not a destination.
Okay, and at AFA, we love hot takes. We love bold opinions, unconventional thoughts. So I am curious, Blaze, and this is no longer rapid fire. You can expand on this as much as you want. What is an unconventional or bold take you either have about leadership or the future of agriculture?
I have an unconventional take about leadership. LinkedIn leadership is not leadership. And I'll explain. But I think we have entered a phase in the last several years due to social media and technology where it is really easy to project. It's performative leadership. It's to project I'm a leader to the outside world because that's easier than actually being a really good leader. Being a really good leader is hard. It's difficult. It's challenging, but being one on social media and looking like a leader is easier. And so I would say that having like a really slick LinkedIn profile and having a lot of, not that there's anything wrong with that, but having those things is neither necessary nor sufficient to being a good leader. There are many amazing leaders out there who are unspoken heroes. They are not like, you cannot find them online, but they are doing an amazing job because it's not necessary to project yourself as a leader to be one. And there are many folks out there that I think project themselves to be amazing leaders, but if you talk to the teams they're leading, they're struggling. So it's also not sufficient. So LinkedIn leadership is not necessary, nor is it sufficient. That's my hot take.
I love that hot take. I think it's one more of us could hear, both from an encouragement standpoint of, looking at people who are doing that kind of work and
Hmm.
sometimes being like, "Oh, should I like find a way to fit that into my life?" And also just a reminder that not everything you see online is real, and some of the like real leadership happens people to people, not necessarily on LinkedIn.
Yes. Maybe just to like add a little bit on there, I love asking people questions like, well, who's the best boss you ever had or best leader you ever had, and one of the things that comes up a lot is people will say, I had this one boss that said all the right things and like outwardly people like just would you would think would be a good leader, but like just didn't I don't think cared about me, didn't really lead our team well. And on the other hand, they'll say, I had someone they didn't always say the right thing, they weren't the most polished, but man, like I would love to work for them again. And so it just reminds me that's one of the reasons why I think I brought up that hot take is that there's some really amazing leaders out there that may not look like it. Don't judge a book by its cover. They may not look like it on the outside, but they really are.
Such a great reminder for all of us. Well, Blaze, this conversation has been so fun. You have incredible stories, and I am so glad we had you on the podcast because not only did I get to learn from you, but I know our listeners will absolutely enjoy this as well. At AFA, we're all about building bridges. So, where can people connect with you and learn more about you and the work that's happening at Vivayic?
Nicole, do you wanna hear some hypocrisy and something ironic? Best
Yes.
place to find me is on LinkedIn.
You do have a good LinkedIn presence, though, and you do write some really good articles. So
it,
I think anyone who's listened to this knows it's not performative.
yeah, that is just too funny, the timing. But honestly, that is probably the best place. The other thing, yes, I like to publish. I like to think and write about leadership, so I publish some things there. You can find them on Medium. And then the other thing is like Vivayic, we call leaders agenda movers. Is our term internally. And so if you go to the website vivayic.com, we have some materials and some resources for agenda movers that I would encourage folks to check out.
Awesome. Well, I will be going to check those out as well and encourage anyone to go find Blaze on LinkedIn or check out Vivac. Blaze, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Cultivating Leaders podcast. Thanks for listening to the Cultivating Leaders podcast brought to you by Agriculture Future of America. If you've been here before, you know we value feedback as a gift. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing.